Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Press TV World News. Now, reactions continue to pour in following the U.S. President's order to withdraw from the Paris climate change. The European Union is mulling over economic measures in a tit-for-tat move. Measures include putting on hold trade talks and imposing heavy carbon taxes on U.S. exports. Austria said Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the historic agreement means that a new partnership should be forged, including with Russia. Belgium called the decision as, quote, a brutal act and an irresponsible move which detracts from promises made. German Chancellor Angela Merkel called Trump's decision regrettable. She, however, said the decision has now made other countries more determined to fight climate change and protect our planet.
We need the Paris Agreement in order to protect our creation. Nothing can and will stop us. And I say on behalf of the German government and Germany, we will implement our responsibilities from the agreement, especially in view of the financing, which will help the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world, because otherwise they will not meet the challenges that come for climate change.
I call on you to remain.
Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron said the Paris Agreement is irreversible, and Macron stresses that Paris will leave no stones unturned to fully implement the accord. In Brussels, China and the European Union issued a statement at the end of their summit on trade and climate, and they pledged to fully stick to the Paris climate deal. While the chorus of criticism against Trump is growing louder, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has avoided criticizing him. Putin believes that the Paris climate deal has yet to come into effect, and the Russian president also says there's still time to reach an agreement if all nations work constructively. Joining us out of Bristol now for more of the stories, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist. Hey there, Tony. Thanks for joining us. And now, Tony, ironically enough, the biggest fossil fuel guy in his cabinet is Foreign Minister Rex Tillerson, who tried to persuade him against this move. Your thoughts on Trump's move and the reactions that we see now pouring in?
Well, I'm not so sure about that because Rex Tillerson really represents the oil industry. I mean, he's the former chief executive of Exxon Mobil. He's the inheritor, really, of the Standard Oil Rockefeller curse. United States has driven this dependence on oil post-World War II. And there's been recently these resource wars, ostensibly about bringing freedom to Iraq, etc., but actually about controlling oil. We're now in the situation in Syria in the Golan Heights, for example, where big interests, including people like Rupert Murdoch, have got oil concessions and they're drilling oil themselves. So oil is a major driving force behind the wars we see today. And Tillerson, it's interesting, him saying this is nothing to do with me because it represents all the interests that he has brought to the Trump government. So, you know, maybe, just maybe, this isn't actually Trump's decision. Maybe it is Tillerson's decision and that they're trying to cover that up.
But, you know, I mean, the White House sources say that it was daughter Ivanka and Tillerson that tried to persuade him against the move. Now, I don't know how accurate that is or credible, but that it was O'Bannon and Scott Pruitt, the current EPA head, a huge fossil fuel guy himself, that were for the move.
Well, I'm sorry, I just don't find that credible because of the interests that Tillerson represents in the government. Also, we need to look at a world beyond oil, don't we? And we must, whether you believe in climate change or not, it doesn't matter. We must reduce our dependence on oil. First of all, to stop fueling these resource wars around the world that are actually, you know, that's the real reason for a lot of these wars today. And also to get rid of the rule of these dinosaurs that are still dependent on oil. And they can't evolve. It's almost as if they can't evolve into the world beyond oil, which do with things like tidal energy, obviously solar. There's all sorts of other sources of energy, and also reducing our dependence on energy. What these interests represent, Tillerson and the rest, is those that want to make us more and more dependent on oil, to have everybody having a car, get rid of public transport. This is what they've been doing in the West over the last 40 or 50 years. Also worth saying here that Trump is quite clearly not a team player when it comes to these big international agreements. I think he's being made to look rather, he's making himself look rather stupid here in saying, well, look, we are going to be the only people that are not going to come to this agreement. And of course, as you said, the Austrians are now saying, well, we should be doing deals with the Russians. So what he's doing is he's opening up a bit of a gulf between Europe and the US. And Europe is starting to think, well, maybe we should be going, making our agreements and alliances and trade more eastwards. By the way, though, I think we've got to be a bit careful about what Merkel says. We should maybe take that with a pinch of salt, because she's got an election coming up, and the United States is a toxic brand. There's a lot of sentiment in Germany who will be voting against anyone that's allied with the United States, and are voting also as secessionist movements out of the European Union. So she has got to make sure that she disassociates herself with the Americans. I think maybe this is a bit of a storm in a teacup. I still think that there will be quite close behind-the-scenes relations between the EU and the United States for a long time to come. And
Tony, before we let you go, we're actually running really short on time here, but you mentioned big international trade agreements. Now we see like one administration like Donald Trump's coming to, and this kind of highlights and underscores the huge bipartisan divide in the country. It's become caustic, hasn't it, where one administration comes in just to try to totally abolish and destroy any legacy left by the previous administration. And what does that do for U.S.'s credibility?
Well, it doesn't do a lot for credibility, but I can tell you right this minute in Chantilly, Virginia, there's the Bilderberg conference taking place. These are the kingmakers of the NATO countries, and they are one of their possibilities on their agenda. It's very difficult to know what they're talking about inside, with Kissinger and the richest people in the Western world in a secret conference. But it looks like they may be talking about whether they're going to dump Trump. We shall see, but that he's definitely top of the agenda in there, and some of the people who are very close to Trump in the cabinet are in this secret meeting in Chantilly, just near Washington, but Trump himself is not invited. I wonder if those people are close to Trump, but they're not really his friends.
Thank you.